Today, I want to talk to you about the hidden cause of growing inequality. And I want to start with a story. It's the story of a man whose name is Mr. Frisby. Despite his wonderful name, he is a real man. He was born in 1963 in Florida. And when he was 15, he left high school and he went to work in an agricultural machinery business just south of Tampa. And he worked there for the next 30 years until he'd saved enough money to start his own business. And he started a scrapyard and metalworking business, and he called it American Dream Welding and Fabrication. And if you like, he is symbolizing that. Because during his lifetime, his American dream is crumbling and disintegrating. The jobs he grew up in, the world he grew up in, the blue-collar industrial sector is declining and disappearing in the United States. And then when the recession comes in 2009, he is really struggling. He goes from 6 employees to just 2, him and his stepson. His partner gets fired from her job at a daycare center. And he starts to get angry and resentful. Why are other people doing okay when he's struggling so much? And so then we come to 2016. He's angry, he's dispossessed. The government are making him put up some stupid fence around his property. It's costing him a whole bunch of money. And he's someone who's going to vote for Donald Trump. Because Trump is at least someone who's giving him some kind of answer. However true or not it is, he's giving him some kind of answer. And I think I want to look at is that Mr. Frisby epitomizes the growing inequality of the United States. He may be one man, but he represents millions. The bottom 60% of Americans, that's 180 million people, are no richer in 2016 than they were in 1973 in real terms. Their incomes have not grown practically at all. And even more significantly, that same 60% of Americans, that's over half the population, are actually poorer in 2015, going into the elections, than they were in 1999. That has never happened before in the history of the United States. Meanwhile, the share of the richest, the share of the top 1%, the top 5%, has risen dramatically. And that's what makes it so tough for people like Mr. Frisby. If everybody was struggling, you could understand. But when you see the few getting rich and you're having a hard time, then it's really tough. And you start to get angry. And the thing is, it's no longer just Mr. Frisby. It's no longer the blue-collar guys that Springsteen sang about. It's the middle classes. It's white-collar jobs that people worry are going to be outsourced or offshored, and they won't have a future. They won't have jobs anymore. And so there's a direct connection between that growing inequality and the political instability and change that we're seeing today. And it isn't just about the US. This growing inequality is happening everywhere around the world. So we need to ask ourselves, what's causing this? What's causing this growing inequality? What's behind it? And what can we do about it? Because it's something systematic. And inequality is growing everywhere, and we've been missing the real source of it. And so today, I want to discover together with you this hidden cause of growing inequality. And what we will see is that there is a direct connection between the digital technology that we are also familiar with and this growing inequality. Now, that might sound surprising. Digital technology is one of the great things of our time. It's brought incredible innovation, incredible progress. We can make phone calls around the world. Businesses have been transformed. And I want to see it's not just digital technology on its own. It is the combination of digital technology's costless copying in combination with the misapplication of old rules of exclusive ownership and control that is causing this growing inequality. To understand let's take a step back and go back to Mr. Frisby for a moment. So we said Mr. Frisby, he grows up He grows up in a period when his traditional industrial sector is declining and disappearing in the United States. His types of job disappear, his types of industry disappear. And at the same time, during his exact lifetime, we see the rise of the modern information economy. When he is 5 years old in 1968, Intel will be founded. When he's 12, Bill Gates will drop out of Harvard and go and found Microsoft. 1 year later, Jobs and Wozniak will start Apple Computer in a garage in Silicon Valley, when Mr. Frisby is 13 years old. Now, you might sit there and say, look, there's always been change. You know, cars replaced horses. People who had horse businesses went out of business. That's life. That's capitalism. That's the free market. There's some people who win, there's some people who lose. There's got to be change if there's going to be innovation. But there's something different now. Because when Mr. Frisby's job goes, it isn't taken by someone else, it's taken by a robot. Now, what's different about that? Because there are people who make robots. But there's something fundamentally different. And to see that, I want you to think of an analogy. I want you to imagine for a moment that the economy is like a race, a running race. Okay? And there are different kinds of races. And when at my school, when I was a kid, we had a running race, a cross-country race, where there wasn't one winner. Anybody who finished in under 2 hours, they'd won. They'd done it. They'd made it. And that was what the old economy was like. Think about it. Imagine for a moment that you were an apple farmer and you grow apples. Now, there are some people who are better at growing apples and some people who are worse. But in general, everyone who does an okay job growing apples will make a living. Or imagine you work in a car factory. There are some people who are better at doing their job faster and some people who are slower. But everybody who does an okay job makes a living, gets a wage. Or even imagine that you own the car factory. Well, there are other people who have car factories, but as long as you do a reasonable job making cars and selling them, you'll compete, you'll sell your cars, you'll make a living. That's a decent free market economy working right there. But then what happened is we got a shift. We got a shift to an economy where there's like a race where there's just one winner. There's someone who comes first and they get all the value, all the money, all the fame, and everyone else, it doesn't matter where they came, they get nothing. Now, why is that like the digital economy? Because in the digital economy, the fundamental, central, massive change is infinite, costless copying. Imagine, once I've got one copy of a piece of software like Windows, I can give it to everybody on the planet at the touch of a button. And it's the same if it's a database or a movie. You can reproduce it for everyone, for 7.5 billion people, practically costlessly. So we now have a situation where one person or one company can supply everybody on the planet on their own. Now, that is very different. Let's go back to the apple farmer for a moment. Okay? There's a limit on how many apples a single farmer can grow. So that means I can grow apples, you can grow apples, someone else can grow apples, and we can all make a living selling our apples. But suppose that one day there is a farmer named Mr. Gates. And Mr. Gates has a magical apple tree, like in those fairy tales. And Mr. Gates' magical apple tree can produce millions of apples every night without any extra cost to him. Suddenly, Mr. Gates can supply everyone in the whole world, everyone in the whole market, and it costs him nothing extra to do so. That means he can undercut everyone else. It means he can dominate the entire market, and everyone else can't sell anything and goes out of business. And that's what's going on. The real world Mr. Gates, once he has one copy of the Windows software, he can give a copy to everybody on the planet costlessly. He can supply everyone, he can dominate the market, and that's what happens. And that's what we're seeing. These incredible monopolies like Facebook, like Google, like Microsoft, everywhere you look in each vertical, you have a monopoly or close to it. Now, there is something really important to add to that story. And that's that the issue is not just infinite costless copying. It's also that we have exclusive ownership and control of the digital material. Mr. Gates, the apple farmer, owns his tree exclusively. Mr. Gates, with Microsoft, they own Windows exclusively. And that is what is crucial. We could have a world in which that magical apple tree that Mr. Gates had was shared with everyone. Everybody had apples. But no, we've created rules that give somebody, one person, exclusive ownership and control. And there's a logic to that. It costs money to create Windows in the first place. It costs money to make a movie. So as a society, we thought, okay, we've got to have a way for them to make their money back. And we've given out these monopoly rights like copyrights and patents that give someone exclusive ownership and control of these movies, this software, these databases. But there's been this massive unintended side effect. The effect of running this new economy on these old rules of ownership, of exclusive ownership and control, is incredible spiraling inequalities. In 2016, the 8 richest people in the world owned as much as the bottom half of humanity. That's 3.5 billion people. And of those 8, 6 were tech billionaires. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg. 40 years ago, not one of the richest people in the world was a tech person. This is an extraordinary and unprecedented concentration of power and wealth made possible because these digital goods are costlessly copyable and exclusively owned. And this creates this incredible anger for Mr. Frisby. He sees his job disappear and he does not know why. He sees the few getting rich and he does not know why. And he gets angry and resentful. It is this inequality driven by the information economy running on old rules of exclusive ownership and control that is the motor behind the greatest political shifts of our time. It is being driven by people like Mr. Frisby, who are angry and dispossessed, and understandably so, who no longer have jobs in this new economy, but are simply being replaced by robots owned by Mr. Bezos, and now have nothing left, not even their labor. So we need new rules. We need new rules for this new economy. Taking the old rules of the physical economy and applying them in this digital world makes no sense. Old property worked, but in this new world, transplanted into the form of intellectual property, it doesn't work. We need to create new rules because intellectual property has become intellectual monopoly. We need new rules, rules that allow for sharing, for costless copying, and for creators and innovators to get paid. And I am here to say that a better world is possible, that we've got stuck in our old world thinking, in thinking that bits are like bread. But they're not. They're different. Apples only magically reproduce in fairy tales in the old world. But in this new world, we really can give a movie or a piece of software to everybody on the planet. It's like magic. But we're preventing that happening. We need new rules. New rules that allow for openness, that allow for remuneration rights. We need to make a new world. We need to restore free markets and free enterprise and make a world where everyone has a chance and everyone has a choice. Thank you very much.